a coral island, windswept, 65 kilometers off the coast of Australia. On it, some 40 men armed with nail-studded pikes face off against a handful of killers wielding the only 2 muskets left. And at the feet of both sides, the bodies of women and children buried in haste beneath the sand. All of this happened almost 160 years before the British First Fleet ever arrived. And here's what doesn't add up. The man who orchestrated this slaughter was no pirate, no hardened soldier. He was an apothecary, a cultured, educated pharmacist with fine manners. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why his punishment was as brutal as his crimes. Let's start at the beginning. It was October 1628. The Batavia, flagship of the Dutch East India Company, the all-powerful VOC, set sail from Holland on her maiden voyage to the East Indies. She carried 341 people aboard. Sailors, soldiers, merchants, and entire families chasing a new life at the far end of the world. In her holds traveled something more dangerous than spices, a fortune in chests of silver and jewels. The ship was captained by the skipper Arie and Jacobs, and aboard was also the commander of the fleet, Francisco Pelsayert. Pelsayert's second in command was Jeronimus Cornelisz, a man who believed in neither heaven nor hell, but that people were free to do good or evil without any spiritual consequence. Cornelisz was fleeing the Netherlands to escape persecution as a heretic. During the crossing, Cornelisz and the skipper Jacobs began plotting. According to the account Pelsayert would later write, Jacobs, together with Cornelisz and several men, planned a mutiny to seize the ship and steal the gold and silver aboard. With that fortune, they thought, they could start a new life where no one knew them, or turn to piracy. And here comes the first sinister episode. To spark the mutiny, they needed Pelsayert to impose a savage punishment and drive the crew to revolt. Jacobs is said to have deliberately steered the ship off course and ordered his men to sexually assault a prominent passenger, Lucretia Jans, hoping to provoke harsh discipline. But Lucretia couldn't identify her attackers, and the incident went unpunished. The mutiny plan had stalled, and then fate intervened in the worst way possible. On June 4, 1629, the Batavia wrecked on the Houtmana Brolhos, a chain of small islands off the western coast of Australia. During the night, the lookout spotted what looked like waves breaking against a shoal. The skipper paid little attention, convinced they were far from shore. He was wrong. Minutes later, the Batavia was impaled on a reef. When the ship began to break apart, around 300 of the 341 people aboard managed to reach land. The rest drowned in the attempt. About 40 people died in the water that night. The survivors crowded onto low, barren coral islets, with almost no food, and worst of all, no fresh water. Here the story takes a turn that seems impossible. Pelsayert sailed nearly 3,000 kilometers over 33 days in an open longboat to Batavia, present-day Jakarta, to get help, leaving the senior VOC official Jeronimus Cornelisz in command, unaware that this man had been planning a mutiny before the wreck. Think about that for a moment. The one man who could stop Cornelisz had just left in a boat, and he was leaving 200 defenseless people in the hands of a killer. Pelsayert's journey was an extraordinary feat. He covered more than 3,000 kilometers in 33 days without losing a single man. But while he rowed toward salvation, on the islands a nightmare was beginning. Before his arrival, the survivors had formed a council, which Cornelisz took over. He replaced its members with his own men, a gang of thugs who had been his accomplices in the mutiny plot. He gathered all the weapons and made sure only he and his men had access to them. He also took control of the boats and makeshift rafts. Cornelisz's aim was cold and calculated. He planned to reduce the survivors to about 40, so he could seize the rescue ship when it arrived and carry out the original plan of piracy. Fewer mouths meant more control, and fewer witnesses. But there was an obstacle, a group of disciplined soldiers who might stand up to him. He sent them to a distant island, today called West Wallaby, on the pretext of searching for water. His men ferried the 22 soldiers, led by a man named Weeby Hayes, stripped them of their weapons and abandoned them. Cornelisz expected them to die of thirst, and with them out of the way, he unleashed the horror. With the help of other mutineers, he orchestrated a massacre that, over several weeks, resulted in the murder of roughly 125 of the remaining survivors, including women, children, and babies. A small number of women were kept as sex slaves. It was a methodical reign of terror. In time, survivors were forced to kill one another to prove their obedience to Cornelisz and save their own lives. But remember the soldiers left to die of thirst. Here's the twist. Fortunately for them, and unknown to Cornelisz, Hayes and his men found not only water on the island, but also small wallabies, which they could hunt and eat. Those men condemned to death now had food, water, and something Cornelisz lacked: discipline. One man managed to escape and swam across to the island to warn Hayes of the massacre unfolding. Forewarned, they prepared. The soldiers crafted makeshift weapons, mounted a guard, and built a small fort out of blocks of limestone and coral. Cornelisz knew those men could warn any rescue ship. He had to eliminate them. In early August, he attempted 2 successive landings, but his men were driven back. Hayes's soldiers, better trained and better fed, held firm. Then Cornelisz made his fatal mistake. On September 2nd, Cornelisz himself and 5 of his trusted men landed on the island, trying to lure some of the defenders to his side with bribes of gold and alcohol. But Hayes, suspecting treachery, fell upon them, killing 4 and taking Cornelisz prisoner. The mastermind of the slaughter was now in chains, but his men did not give up. The rest of them tried to free him on September 17th by launching a fresh assault on the island. In the middle of the attack, a sail appeared on the horizon. It was the Saddam, Pelsayat's rescue ship. In October 1629, at the height of their last and deadliest battle, they were interrupted by Pelsayat's return aboard the Saddam. Then came a desperate race. Cornelisz's henchmen now faced the combined forces of the Saddam and Hayes, and both sides raced to reach Pelsayat first. Hayes's men won. They warned Pelsayat. The mutineers surrendered, and the reckoning began. Interrogated and tortured until they signed their confessions, the mutineers were tried for the murder of more than 120 people. The trial was held right there on the islands. After confessing their crimes, the condemned mutineers were sentenced to have their right hand cut off, and in Cornelisz's case, both hands, before being hanged. The punishments were carried out on October 2nd, 1629. Remember, I told you his punishment would be as brutal as his crimes. This was why. The apothecary had both hands cut off before he was hanged. And here comes the strangest ending of all. 2 mutineers, convicted of lesser crimes, were marooned on the Australian mainland, becoming the first Europeans to permanently inhabit the Australian continent, though they were never heard from again. They vanished into history. 2 killers abandoned on an unknown shore, the first European residents of an entire continent. Of the 3 A41 people who set sail from Holland, only 116 finally reached the port of Batavia. Today, almost 4 centuries later, those islands still keep their secrets. Skeletal remains of passengers and crew murdered by the mutineers were recovered from Beacon Island in the 1960s. On West Wallaby still stand the ruins of 2 stone huts built by Weeby Hayes and his men. They are believed to be the oldest European-built structures on the Australian continent. A stone fort raised by men who had been left to die, and who, against all odds, ended up stopping a monster.